Hello, everyone, and welcome to another very special episode of the 1973 podcast. I am glad to have one of my favorite goalies all time, Daren Puppa, on the show this week. Daren, thank you for coming on and sitting down with the boys and talking about your career and keeping the NHL alumni relevant. That's what we're trying to do here.
Well, thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me on. Like you said, let's keep the guys going. We paved the way for the NHL, and we're still part of it.
So, before we start getting into the career aspect of it, the what drew me to being a fan of yours is I have a soft spot for not all goalies, but left-handed goalies. And there's a reason for that because my dad was a left-handed goalie. And anytime that we'd watch games and he saw somebody for the first time that was a left-handed goalie already, he was a fan because when he started, it was so hard to find left-handed equipment. And I think I mentioned that when we spoke briefly. But so from the Clark family, we were fans right from the get go, just on that little tidbit, and then it grew from there. So I always want to start by asking your start on your journey as a youth and how the whole hockey journey started before we get into the draft and the pro career and the love of the game before it was, you know, a pro sport.
I grew up in a small gold mining town in Kirkland Lake, Northern Ontario. I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it's a town that probably produced more NHL hockey players per capita than any other place in the world. Especially when I was younger, there was so many people from Kirkland Lake that were playing in the NHL at the time. So growing up, I had a good following. My cousin won 6 Stanley Cups with the Canadians, so that was pretty good. Growing up, little tool, and really fell in love with hockey. Fell in love with the Montreal Canadiens, and really liked Toronto Maple Leafs because Mike Palmetier was a left-handed goalie. Caught right, ate popcorn every day, and he was just a fun goalie to watch.
So how did you end up starting to play goalie? Did you start skating out and then you kind of fell into playing goal, or
I never skated out. I was always a goalie. My dad was a goalie. My younger brother was a goalie. My dad went to the Detroit Red Wings camp back when he was 17 or 18. Back then, there was like one goalie on each team, and right then, I think it was Holiday or Sawchuk was there at the time, and you really didn't have a chance to break in when those guys were playing 25 years. So he decided to go to school, and he won the Ontario Championship as a goalie, and decided to be a physics teacher instead of a goalie in the NHL. I think if we would have had 32 teams nowadays, he would have made it. But back then, when you had the original six, it was a tough break-in when the goalies were playing 20 years each, and the trainers were the backups.
now having a goalie family, so there was never a problem ever finding equipment as you went through the ranks.
I had trouble because I was a left-handed goalie. They didn't make anything for you really back then. I was very fortunate to actually, especially in my hometown, being so small, that the local hardware store actually got them in for me, and I really appreciated it. And I tried to play the other hand, and I was no good at it at all.
So when did you realize in your uh, going through the ranks into junior and when the NHL was a possibility?
Growing up, you're in awe of the guys. I was in awe of Ken Dryden, and he was my kind of hero growing up. And I had no inkling that I would ever make the NHL. I was just playing hockey. That's what you do as a kid. You play baseball in the summer for like 2 months in northern Canada, and 10 months you play hockey. And so I played both of those, but hockey was definitely my passion. And watched my dad play. He played till he was like 57 years old in old timers league and stuff. So I used to watch him all the time play. So it was just something that you grew up with, and I had no inkling of. My whole goal was to get a scholarship in Division I college, and I succeeded in doing that. So I was happy just to do that. And, getting drafted in the NHL was a funny story too because I was working on the golf course and working cutting grass. That was my summer job for like 5 years. And the boss kind of treated me okay, but didn't treat me that great. So we went in for lunch and we watched the draft on TV, and they announced that I got picked to be in the NHL. And all of a sudden, the whole atmosphere around my boss changed, and he's like, "That's you." I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." So it wasn't like you went to the draft. You just turn the TV on at noon hour and find out you're drafted, and that's how I found out I was drafted.
So 74th overall by the Sabres. But before we get to that, let's talk about the college career. You left something out, a national championship, correct?
Oh yeah, I haven't got there yet.
Okay. All right. So
I got
let's talk
drafted
about
before I went to college. I got drafted, so there's a good story too about getting drafted. Scotty Bowman drafted me in the fourth round, and I was supposed to go to Edmonton. The head scout for Edmonton was actually from Kirkland Lake, from my hometown. So I was supposed to go there, or Montreal was interested in drafting me, but they're going to draft me a little later. And I guess, Scotty, this is a story, and I haven't been able to back it up after 40 years. I still haven't been able to get the true story, but supposedly Scotty was at the urinal and he overheard some scouts talk about me and he decided to take a chance on me in the fourth round instead of letting me go a little later in the draft.
so you were saying Edmonton had interest. Just imagine that you and Grant Fuhr, two left-handed goalies for that in the 80s. That would have been pretty epic.
It was pretty epic in Buffalo too, because me and Tommy Barrasso, who was another left-handed goalie. So I
Just
hear the guys complain a little bit because they didn't get to practice on anybody that was the other hand. So
that
they like just kind of shut down their goal scoring a little bit. But I think if you're a good goal scorer, it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're going to be able to survive having two left-handed goalies on your team.
now before we get too far away from you brought up Tom Barrasso. I was going to bring that up later on. That from a fan perspective, there always was a little urban legend. So on the back of Barrasso's Sabres helmet, it
Hmm.
had all world.
Yeah,
And I believe that on the back of your helmet, it said all universe as a one up. Is that true or not true?
I don't think it was the one up. It was just just a kind of something that happened behind the scenes with the trainers and the guys that I didn't put it there. They put it there, and it kind of stuck. And I actually really enjoyed the all universe. You just it was just more for fun and just trying to. I don't really know exactly what happened. It's been 40 years since it happened, but I was proud to wear it. That's all I know.
I as a younger person, like I said, I've mentioned this on other podcasts. I used to get the Hockey Digest, and it was all kinds of little tidbits, and I was so into like every little nuance of the NHL back then, with everything growing up as a kid, and every little tidbit I could get before the internet, and little things like that just were like so attractive to me. With hey, I know something that you don't know, and all these little deep dives. So I always thought that was cool. Just saying. So let's go
Yeah,
back
it was
to
just fun. It was just for fun.
okay.
And it
For the
worked out
record.
pretty good. It worked out pretty good. Actually, if you remember that, then it definitely did what it was supposed to do.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
remember that. And first thing I wanted to talk about was that was one of my bullet points I wanted to ask you about as a fan.
Yeah,
So
it was just in jest, and I think Tommy kind of ruffled his feathers a little bit, but I didn't really
that
care too much.
a trade came out of that, let's just say, right? Eventually.
Eventually, it did.
Yeah.
Tommy, was very fortunate to go to Pittsburgh and win two Stanley Cups there with Mario Lemieux. So he did okay.
Okay, he did all right.
He did okay. He's all world.
So let's go back and start talking about the run in college before we get into more NHL stories. So RPI, if I remember correctly. Um, how did that whole choosing that university to go there and memories of your time there?
Growing up in Kirkland Lake, I was going to Denver University the whole time. Division One. My cousin was the head coach, Ralph Backstrom, who played for the Canadians and won 6 Stanley Cups with him. I was just going to Denver since I was like 16 years old. I was heading that way. If he wanted me, I was going there. And I went on my recruiting trip and met all the guys and had a good time and showed me the ropes, and it was really good. And then the last day I met with the dean of engineering because my whole family is basically engineers or scientists and all that fun stuff. So I was going to college to take engineering because I wasn't planning on the NHL calling my number. I was more interested in getting a college degree, and the dean of engineering would not let me take engineering and play at Denver. Said you just too many games, too many road trips, and you just really couldn't handle it. And so I had a bunch of colleges where I could have went on recruiting trips, but with hockey schedule and stuff, I decided RPI and Denver. I narrowed it down to those two. And RPI, they sent me out with the goalie that was there, and he was like the valedictorian, and he was engineer and got a 4.0, Rennie Fredette, and he was my guy for like 4 days on my recruiting trip. So I knew I could take engineering and go to RPI, and they had an okay team, and they were just up and coming. They scored a lot of goals, but they didn't prevent very many. So it was a good opportunity because I would be the guy. There would be two of us, and we just fight for the crease. But there was no returning veterans, so there was two rookie goaltenders that would go in there, me and Brian Joplin. So it was a good opportunity for me. I could take engineering and have a chance to be the starting goalie.
So, how did the whole run for national championship happen? Did the memories of any certain guys on the team or fun stories from that run?
We had a good team the year before, actually, probably maybe even a little better team even the year before. We had some really good senior players that obviously didn't return for the next year, but we lost in the quarterfinals in NCAA's at home. We got home ice advantage. This goalie called John Casey stood in his head. You know, obviously he played for in the NHL for a long time, but he stood in his head and he outdueled me. But we had a good team. But it was my first year, and it was a learning curve to get past that first year to get to the second year. But we had a really good chance. It was the finals were in Lake Placid, so it would have been right up the road from RPI, but it just didn't happen. John Casey took it over, and obviously had a good career. He's remembered for a goal that Mario Lemieux scored on him in the finals more than anything else. But
Yeah.
yeah, he had a good career.
So, from if I remember correctly, there was like you were one of the fastest guys to make an NHL debut after winning a national championship. I don't know if it still stands, but I remember that was one of the big things that I remember them mentioning from the commentators at the time. Do you remember any how quickly you were whisked up to the Sabres like after the national championship?
Well, let's talk about the national championship first too, because
Okay.
I didn't get to that bullet point.
Okay.
You asked who we had. Adam Oates, one of the greatest Hall of Fame guys and assist man that played in the NHL. He was our leader, and he scored like 80, 90 points the 2 years I was there. And we had a really good team. We had a bunch of guys turn pro right after we won the NCAA. I think there was like 7 guys that turned pro right away. And John Carter was a good goal scorer, and Kenny Hammond, Mike Dark, and we had a bunch of guys that George Savinas, guys that had half decent careers in the NHL too. So we had a really good team, and it just all came together like it has to. You got a chemistry, and we had chemistry, and we had a bunch of good guys, and we just had a good team that went to Joe Louis Arena, and it was memorable. The first game I didn't play that well, but we won in like three overtimes against this guy called Brett Hall. He shot one from the blue line that almost beat me. I wasn't ready for a guy that was that talented goal scorer, but we ended up beating him. So it was a learning lesson as you go along, and we did a good job of preventing Chris Terreri, who's another great goalie, played for New Jersey for a long time. You know, he was just standing on his head the whole playoffs, and we ended up beating him 2-1, but we had to fight really hard to get those two goals.
So after the national championship, how did that transition start with leaving to go to the NHL?
Um, I just thought it was time to go. I was only a sophomore, but you know, your value is as good as you are your last game. And my last game, we won the NCAA's, so they treated me like a first rounder coming out of college, which I couldn't really pass up because you only got a finite number of years in the NHL and a pro career. You can get hurt and not have a pro career. So time was right for me. And like I said, I played with a bunch of guys that turned pro. So I was used to the pro style game. We kind of played the pro style game in RPI.
So before we get too far into it, I don't want to hijack the show. I want Tom and Ed to ask at least a round of questions. Tom, you got a question for Daren where we are right now in the timeline?
Where you were talking about the your first game with the Sabres. Is there anything that you still remember to this day that really stood out to you?
I remember the pretty much the whole game, which was unreal for me because you don't really remember games to each one. But I was in Edmonton playing the Oilers. They'd won two Stanley Cups in a row. They were in the midst of winning 4 or 5 years, and they had that guy named Gretzky and Messier and Curry and Glenn Anderson and Paul Coffey and Grant Fuhr and Andy Moog and a whole bunch of other guys that were just great players. So excuse me, they were kind of like throw me to the wolves. You know, Jim Schoenfeld was our coach. He's like, "Hey kid, you're in tonight." I'm like, "Oh great, my first game in the NHL. I'm going into the Lions Den with probably the best team that ever played the game, in my opinion. I think." At least talent wise, and having Wayne Gretzky in his prime on your team was kind of something that I'll remember forever because Wayne had like three breakaways on me, and I stopped in every breakaway, even though he had all the moves and had everything going for him. And I remember Paul Coffey taking a slap shot, running in from the blue line, taking a slap shot, and I'm sitting there going, "Do I stand? Do I go down? Do I stand? Do I go down?" I had no time to think about it in my head. I was thinking about it, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to stand up." So he went high, blocker corner, and I made the save, and we ended up winning the game 2-0. So it was nice to get a shout in your first game, but it was really even more nicer to beat the defending Stanley Cup champions in their own barn.
That's actually a good way to already set the tone, as the kids say, right off the bat for the first game.
First game, I was the NHL Player of the Week that week. Just played one game. Usually, you got to play like three or four to get the Player of the Week, but I still have that little trophy. It was a big deal for me to get the career going, and it gave me some instant credibility, which was huge. Coming off the NCAA's, you just don't know what you have in the NHL and what kind of career you're going to have. But it was a nice way to start the whole career off.
Ed, question for Daren.
Sure, Darren. I was going to just ask you, what's the mental checklist or kind of like a mental scouting report that you do against a team that has, that many lines of talent that they had?
Back then, we really didn't have too many scouting reports. You know the guys. There was no social media. There was no computers. All I remember is walking downtown Edmonton with my Walkman on because I couldn't sleep because usually you take a nap and getting ready for the game. And Jim Schoenfeld, before the game, goes, "Okay, who's going to be the player of the game? Whoever's going to be the player of the game." I got a little camera here. It was a little cheap little camera. I'm like, "Okay, player of the game is going to get the camera." I'm like, "Okay, I'm getting that camera." And that was my goal the whole game was to get the camera. I ended up with the camera.
Nice.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished.
So
It kind of settled my nerves, because you had to focus on something other than just facing the best team ever played again. I remember watching in my hometown before I went to college and how great they were and beat the Islanders and I think they beat the Canadians and beat my team. And they were just starting their powerhouse, learning their way along, and they learned pretty good.
Darren, so you mentioned Mike Palmetier and Ken Dryden. Did you ever get a chance to meet either one of those guys?
I met Ken Dryden at I was up for the Vezina Award in Toronto. That year, Patrick Roy beat me out, but I came second. And I met Ken Dryden. He came up to me at the table, and it was a good experience to meet somebody you idolized. And he was done with hockey at the time, and I think he retired way too early. But I also met Tony Esposito, and Tony kind of took me under his wing for the rest of my career a little bit. So it was two really great goaltender Hall of Famers that I got to meet. I never got to meet Mike Palmetier, but I would like to if I ever had that chance.
So let's talk. Let's get back to the Sabres and your teammate Tom Barrasso. So that run with the Sabres, what memories do you have of interacting with Tom Barrasso when you got there? Did you guys hit it off right off the bat, or was there, uh, was there a push pull with like driving each other to be better? Was there animosity when somebody had to sit the bench?
Well, I was a rookie coming in. He was coming off 2 years earlier, winning the Vezina and rookie of the year and all that fun stuff. So, I knew my place at the time coming in there. And actually, Tommy put me up in his place for a week when I was just playing with the guys. He let me stay at his house. And another story was when I was at RPI, I was coming in for training camp and my car broke down on the way there. So I lost 4 or 5 gears. I had first gear, so I'm limping back to RPI at like 20 miles an hour with my flashers on, going, okay, this is a great omen right going right here. I got to be there for training camp the next day, and I'm not. So I actually found a Greyhound bus ticket at 12 midnight that got into Buffalo at 5 a.m. And I called Tommy up, and guess who picked me up from the bus station, drove me to camp. The rookies were in camp early, like the day earlier or 2 days earlier than, so he didn't have to be there. But that was the kind of guy. He came and actually picked me up at 5 a.m. off the Greyhound bus. I was fortunate enough to get there in time. Otherwise, that would have been a bad scene to start your pro career with not being able to get there because your car breaks down on the way to Buffalo.
That's an all world move. It's an all world
All
move.
world.
Tom, question for Darren.
Yeah, throughout your with when you were with Buffalo, who did did you have a goalie coach or a coach that really took you under their wing? And is that where you like gained your confidence? Did you have anyone there to mentor you?
um, I had Tommy Brasso there, Vezina winner, the guy to follow and watch him practice and do everything. Doug Favell was our goalie coach, but he was kind of a part-time guy, so he just come in and give me advice. And he still the advice today he would give me would be like, kid, just stand up, because goalies always stood up back then, and they taught you to not go down. But I always went in the butterflies, so I was ahead of my time, I guess, because no goalie stands up anymore. But I got to watch Tom Barrasso. Bob Sauve was a great goalie. He was around there. He was still playing there, and Jacques Cloutier was a great guy. So I had a bunch of goaltenders around me that played the game and were really good at it.
Ed, question for Darren.
Sure, Darren. Who's your favorite roommate on the road? And is there kind of like a PG story that you could tell that statute of limitations won't get you into trouble or anything like that?
Uh, I had a bunch of roommates. I had Tom Brass was my roommate for a while. Um, that was an adventure in itself because Tommy's Tommy and Tommy has his way, so I didn't want to mess with his routine at all. So I was just the rookie coming in. So we were roommates for my first roommate was Bill Height, and he was definitely a businessman. He had his briefcase with him wherever he went. So my first game in Edmonton, Bill Height was my roommate, and he went to sleep like 8 o'clock at night, and I'm like a night owl. So that was kind of an adjustment. But I've had probably hundreds of different roommates over the years, and they're all good, and I got along with basically everybody, and that's the whole point is you just try to not mess with them too much.
Now, Darren, my question is one of the guys that I really enjoyed watching as a kid too. I'm not sure how long you got to play with him, Pat LaFontaine. A great Pat LaFontaine story.
Pat was a great hockey player, probably one of the best hockey players I've ever seen play the game. A good story was we're at the Super Bowl at his house, and we're messing around a little bit, and guys are getting a little bit of testy, and probably a little couple fights break out at his house. And me and Dave Aronchuk get traded the next day. We get the phone call. So I don't know if it had anything to do with the stuff that was going on at Pat LaFontaine's house, but the next day, me and Dave are on our way to Toronto. So we never got to see the guys after that, except for on the ice. But
Uh,
Pat was a great guy, and always a showman. And when he came in, it was a huge, huge deal for the Sabres getting him from Long Island. It was a
the
big deal coming
Were you
in.
there during the Alexander Mogilny defection from Russia?
I was, and Alex was a great guy, and obviously a great goal scorer. And I'm very happy for him to get in the Hall of Fame because he took a big chance in life, coming over from that. So yeah, I was there when he was coming in from Russia, and it was a big deal, and he just fit right in and played a really good game, and he was just. I guess he started the defection of other Russians, especially the ones who went to Detroit and stuff.
Yeah, that whole story with him defecting in the middle of the night and how they moved him a bunch of times, and it was all kind of planned out, like almost like cloak and dagger kind of moves to get him out of there. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, I don't know the story that much anymore, but at the time it was a huge deal for the organization, and he had to worry and watch his back all the time, at least for the first couple of years, because they didn't really let you to defect too often. I think he was in the army or whatever at the time too.
Right. Tom, question for Darren.
Yeah, you mentioned briefly earlier about the year, I think it was 89-90 when you were up for the Vezina, where you went 31 and 16. And what clicked for you that year that hadn't clicked before?
Well, I got a chance to play more games. Tommy got traded away, so I inherited the number one position. So when you're playing games, you can be better goalie. When you're playing like once every 2 weeks or so, it's hard to get a rhythm going. So I really did better because I played a lot more games. And by then, had my feet wet enough for 3 or 4 years in the NHL. So you knew how to play, and I had more confidence. And when you're playing every night or every second or most every night, you're you're the guy. So they depend on you to be the guy, and you just take that and add confidence to your game and make sure that you're ready to play every night.
Ed, question for Darren.
Sure, Darren. What was your favorite building to play in? And I'm going to ask you this because we've had two people already that we've interviewed say that playing in Buffalo was in the building wasn't as much fun as playing in some other buildings. So
Chicago Stadium was my favorite building. The fans were crazy, had the organ going, the dressing room was underneath the stands. So you felt like they were stomping on top of you, like the whole thing was gonna cave in on you. But if you can't get going with that national anthem with the organ and in the Chicago Stadium, you can never get going. So that was my favorite place to play. The Boston Garden was obviously a great place to play, especially my college career. We won the ECHL in the Boston Garden, so I had a good feeling for it. And my first few games in there, I did really well until I didn't. But the Boston Garden was one of my favorites. The Montreal Forum was electric. The Maple Leaf Gardens, obviously, and I really like the Odd because there was a lot of fights going on in the stands all the time because you had all the Canadians and the Americans. Or half the crowd would be Canadian, half the crowd would be Americans.
So when Tommy left, I believe they brought in, was it Clint Malachuk after that? When to back you up?
I shattered my arm. I broke my arm over the post, shattered it in a bunch of pieces, and there was shrapnel all over the place inside my arm, and my nerve was compromised. So I spent 5 days in the hospital trying to repair it, and they put it back on as best they could, but ended up with a gun stock deformity. So in the meantime, that's when Clint came in because they needed a goalie because I was done. Jacques Cloutier was there, but they needed another goalie, so they brought in Clint because of that. And then whatever, you know what happened to Clint was probably like a week or two later.
Right, right. Yeah. So from Buffalo, how did the trade? Do you remember how the movement happened when you left Buffalo?
Tommy's trade or my trade?
Oh, your trade, your trade.
My trade. Oh yeah. Like I said, me and Dave Aronchuk, we're on our way to Toronto. We actually had a game that night in Toronto. I didn't play, but I sat on the bench. But they had a guy there, Felix Pavan was there, so he was a rookie, and so he was their guy because they gave up Grant Fuhr to Buffalo in the trade. So I knew I would get some playing time because there was really only two of us there. So it was a good opportunity because Toronto had a great team. The only problem with Toronto was that the expansion draft to Florida was the next that summer, and they could only protect one goalie. So I was the odd man out. But we had a great run. We went to semifinals in the playoffs, and we ran into Game 7 at home with a guy named Gretzky that decided to score a hat trick and decided to say that it was his greatest game he's ever played in his life after all the great games and all the points he had. He had to leave it for the great game just to knock us out. I think if he doesn't score the hat trick there, we lost 5-4, we would have won the game 4-2, 4-3 or something, and then the whole country would have shut down for about 2 weeks because it would have been Toronto against Montreal. It was the year of the Montreal '93 that won the Stanley Cup.
So I got to ask you for that short time in Toronto. There were some of my favorite players were on that team. You had Doug Gilmore, you had Wendell Clark, Felix Potvin. I I know that I'm forgetting other guys, but those are the names that stick out to me. Thoughts on? Let's start with Doug Gilmore. Thoughts on playing with Doug Gilmore?
What a feisty guy he was, He was a little guy, but he played like he was like 6'6". He was a great player, great leader. One of the guys, always upbeat and ready to go. And you just followed him around. You followed him around, and Wendell kind of owned the city, so you followed him around too. But he had some like Glenn Anderson with the coming from Edmonton and being a player that everybody could look up to because he's won, I think, 4 Stanley Cups with him, maybe five even. But we had a great team, and we like I said, would have shut down the country for 2 weeks if we ended up in the finals. But Gretzky put an end to that.
I got to ask you
There
about
hasn't been
another
a Canadian
player.
team that won it since. So
I got to ask you about Ty Domi.
Ty was a great guy. He was just one of the guys that you could always count on to have your back, and he was a great hockey player too, and he was just not the goon, but he was dynamic and he could score goals, and he was a great leader too.
Tom, question for Daren before we move on to Tampa.
Yeah, were you the type of goalie that needed to see a lot of shots to get into the flow of the game, or did you just let the game come to you?
I could play either way. I enjoyed when I got a lot of shots. It was more fun when you get into it, and like you said, it's just something that is much easier to play goaltender when you're getting a lot of shots. If you're standing there and getting 12, 16 shots a game, you let one or two in, and it's a bad night. If you get 40, 50 shots and let one or two, it's a good night. So mentally, it was a lot easier getting a lot of shots.
Ed, question for Daren.
Who was the guy that had the hardest shot that you played against?
Al McGinnis, by far. He's the guy that scared you. When he shot, even from the blue line, it was just a heavy shot, and you end up with bruises all over your body from that. I'd hate to play on the team with him shooting in practice, but during the game, Al McGinnis, I thought he was one guy that would scare you with how heavy his shot was.
So, Daren, tell everybody who doesn't realize how you ended up in Tampa. And for me, I always thought that you had some of your best seasons in Tampa. But for the fans that don't remember the expansion, how did you end up in Tampa?
Well, there's an expansion draft, and Florida picked me in the expansion draft. Tampa worked out a deal, I think, for a fourth round draft pick or something like that. I think Toronto was in the works too, and they were trying to keep me in there. They were offering some draft picks for Florida not to take me. So Tony Esposito and Phil Esposito were in Tampa at the time, and Tony was the GM in Pittsburgh at the time when he traded for Tommy. And what I hear was either me or Tommy. He didn't care which one. He just wanted the goalie. And Tommy was the fortunate one to get this team with Stanley Cups. But so Tony was in Tampa, so he really wanted me, and so he made a better deal than Toronto did to keep me. So that's how I ended up in Tampa through Florida. Never got a jersey from Florida, being there for a cup of coffee, but I was there for like 2 minutes before I got traded to Tampa, I'm pretty sure.
Tom, question for Daren while we're on the timeline.
What what was the biggest difference in the locker room cultures with all the teams you were with? Was there a major difference between the locker room cultures?
Um, some teams are better than others. Some teams have more chemistry than others. Even Tampa, we didn't have a very good team, but we had a lot of expansion guys and a lot of guys I played with in Buffalo and even in Toronto that came down to Tampa. So we had a good chemistry. We weren't very good, but we had a good bunch of guys and we worked hard. The more veteran players you have, my first experience in Buffalo, my first year was this guy named Gilbert Perreault and Craig Ramsey. They took me under the wing and they showed me where to go in each city. They made sure that I was well taken care of as a rookie. But that's fond memories of Gilbert Perreault saying, "Kid, let's go. We're heading out." So it's all about the veterans, taking care of the young guys and building the chemistry makes a difference. So we had a good chemistry in Toronto. Too bad we didn't get to the finals because if I think if we would have got to the finals, we would have gave Montreal a good run for their money with that team because it was just a veteran team with a lot of experience and a lot of heart.
Nice. It would have been a all Canada Stanley Cup, and you would have gone head to head with Patrick Roy. That would have been something to put in the record books right there.
Yeah, that would have been fun. And I don't know if the NHL would have been too happy, but Canada would have shut down, like I said. They would have been ecstatic to get Toronto and Montreal, the two original uh, teams in the NHL, in a final because I don't think it happened. Maybe in the '60s it happened, but not for a
Not,
long time.
yeah, not in the modern era. It hasn't happened.
No,
Ed, question for Daren.
I actually got two. Darren, who had the best wrist shot that you ever went up against, and what was your toughest save that you ever made?
I guess my toughest save I ever made was Gretzky in my opening night on the breakaway, making 3 or 4 steaks, and I'm diving and I threw my glove and threw my stick at him, not at him, but at the puck, and I got fortunate where it hit my blocker hand and just popped over the net. But That was one of the tougher saves I ever had. Because looking back at it, I thought for sure it went in the net, but it didn't. So I was very fortunate. Wrist shots, I think there's plenty of guys with good wrist shots. But back when I played, it was more of a slap shot kind of league. So the harder shots were from slap shots, not wrist shots. But I really can't remember exactly who had the wrist shots. But I think Brett Hall had a really good release, and he was one of the better guys with wrist shots. And obviously, he proved it with a lot of goals in the NHL. And forget how many, but he's up there in the top 10.
So with that Tampa Bay Lightning team, 96, there was a fantastic playoff run from them. Do you remember that playoff run at all with the Lightning?
How we played Philly, Lindros years. He was a great player, but we had a tough team. We were actually built to actually play with the Flyers, toughness wise. They had more talent than we did, but uh, the whole memory from that year was getting into the playoffs. We won a bunch of our last games to get in. We got in like in the last day. I remember we were playing Madison Square Garden and beat the Rangers to get in. And it was a big feat, especially for our fan base, because they were just starting to learn the game. And we were playing in a baseball stadium where the Rays play. And, we were putting in there 25,000 fans. So we had a good following, and they were just starting to learn the game and put the Lightning on the map, getting into the playoffs that year. The Florida Panthers got in the same year, but they ended up beating Philly, and we didn't. I ended up hurting my back in the Philly series, so I couldn't play all the games. And I think that was the biggest problem for me was I just couldn't play at 100% and I couldn't tie my skates. And it was just tried to muster out and play. But in the end, they got us 4-2.
Now, with that being an expansion team in Tampa, how do you remember the fans reacting to the hockey culture? Let's just say from growing up in the hockey culture and going all the way through it to a market where hockey wasn't really even that big of a sport. Probably NASCAR was bigger at the time down there. It's not since then, but at the time. Thoughts on the fan base?
Let's see, I went from Toronto. You're a Hollywood star playing for the Maple Leafs. Within 2 weeks of being in Toronto, everyone knew who you were. Even though I was the backup goalie, they still knew exactly who I was and stuff. Went to Tampa, and it was totally opposite. Nobody knew who you were. You could go downtown or go anywhere you wanted. Nobody had any idea you were a hockey player compared to Toronto. And the first year at the fairgrounds, this good story was I had the dressing room for the Leafs was the away team was a little too small, so I was backup goalie, so I was dressing out with the elephants because the circus was in town, and so that was my first experience with Tampa. I wasn't here yet, but that was my first experience, and then the second experience was we're playing in the baseball stadium, so I came down and Phil Esposito was doing his magic, and he got the team there in the first place. So it was a lot of growing pains. Didn't really have anywhere to play, so they finally got a rink in '96. But the first few years, like I said, we go downtown and we nothing, no people, no more than just tumbleweeds going down, trying to avoid them with your car more than anything else. But you go from Toronto, the Mecca for hockey, to Tampa, who was just learning the game. It took a while, but Tampa is a great city for hockey nowadays.
Tom, question for Daren.
Yeah, what qualities do you think are most important for goalies today that maybe weren't emphasized during your career?
Everybody does a butterfly, everybody goes down. My career, everybody stood up and you had to stand up, or they tried to make you stand up. But like Tony Esposito, he was a butterfly guy. Sawchuk, butterfly guy. I think Glenn Hall was too. So there was a lot of legends that played that style. So I was a butterfly guy myself. I try to do a mixture as much as I could because you can stop the cut at the top corners if you're standing up. But the difference today is the goalies are you can't stand up with the pads and equipment. The equipment is so much better and more productive. and the goalies are, I think, more acrobatic today, and they just play a little different style than they did when I was. They don't teach. They teach you all the different tricks now of playing on the ice, not standing up.
Ed, question for Daren.
Sure. And Darren, what do you think of the new composite sticks and how flexible they are and how the puck comes off of it now, and versus the old Sherwood wooden sticks and the big co-hos and everything like that back in the late 80s and 90s.
Right, you got a lot more whip in the sticks. They're a lot lighter. Guys are taking a lot more wrist shots and slap shots nowadays because they can get that speed up. Where the wooden sticks, you had to do it with slap shots to get the speed up to 100 miles an hour. But you can get up 80, 90 miles an hour with wrist shots now. So you can be a lot more accurate with a wrist shot than you can with slap shots. So guys have learned how to play with the new sticks, and being so much lighter, you can get more whip out of them.
So, Darren, I want to ask you the end of the NHL career. How did it all come about, and how did you transition from your NHL career to life after hockey?
Well, basically, you don't try to end. I didn't retire. They just kicked me out, So, but I hurt my back, and I couldn't do what I needed to do to play professional hockey anymore. So I'd get 30, 40 games in, but then my back would blow out, and it'd be tough to get it back. It'd take 3, 4 months to get it back to where you had to play in the NHL. But made a transition. I retired. My kids were really, really young, so I got to be Mr. Dad for a little bit, which was very enjoyable growing up. And we stayed in Tampa, and then we had a cottage up in Maine, which we really enjoyed. So I got to spend some good quality time with my kids for the first few years after I retired.
Tom, before we let Darren go, one more question.
Yeah, when you look back at your career, what are you most proud of?
Perseverance, I played a lot of games. I played, battled through injuries. Um, Never got a Stanley Cup, got the Calder Cup, got the NCAA championship. So I won at every level except for the one that gives a Stanley Cup with it. But I had a really good career. I had 15 years of fun and enjoyed it, and just had a good time playing NHL. As a kid, you growing up, it's a dream that you really don't think you're ever going to do. But I ended up doing it, so I enjoyed every minute of playing the NHL, and would go back tomorrow if I could, health wise, and turn the clock back because I think I could play the style they play today. I really would enjoy it playing that style.
Ed, one last question from you for Darren.
Right. Darren, was there anything in the off season that you did to kind of prepare yourself to, you know, because we've had some guys come on and they were kind of, back in the 70s, they went to camp to get into shape. And guys, as we went through the 80s, they kind of got into shape before they went to camp. Was there any particular training regimen that you did to get in shape before you went to camp and get ready for a long season?
Yeah, I'd work out, I'd take maybe a week or two off, and then get right back at it and work out and hit the weights and the cardio. And in the 80s, everybody was in pretty good shape. They might not have. They did training camp in the 70s to get in shape, according to Phil, anyways. But we had to come to camp in shape. They worked your butt off right from day one. If you weren't in shape, which some guys didn't come in shape, not everybody got the memo, but they'd be throwing up in the corners, and it's not a pretty sight.
That's not.
So, Darren, for all the hockey fans that are gonna see this and they want to get in touch with you on social media, or what do you have going on right now as far as how they can connect with you if they're, probably a fan that hasn't seen you on social media, or how can they reach you or connect with you, or do you have anything going on for youth hockey or goalie clinics or anything else?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of work with my nephew as a goalie, and I worked with my brother-in-law, and he was a goalie, and my brother was a goalie. But I'm on social media, and I got my website. I'm writing a book, Journal for Goaltending, and trying to. I'll get that out in a little bit. But I got a Poop Academy for goaltender development. I got that going. Go to my AGD website, DarenPuppa.com website. I'm on X and TikTok and YouTube. You can see some of the videos I've been posting of teaching goalies and trying to get goalie coaching. I've been working on it in Raleigh and I worked out in Tampa, but I'm trying to go full bore on that. So you can look me up. I'm all over the internet, and I'm going to try to help the younger goalies, try to get them better, and then try to work my way back and do whatever I can to teach the goalies what I know and my knowledge and experience I've had with the 15 years of playing the NHL.
So I was very, like I said before we went on the air, I was very happy when I reached out to you and sent you a message and you responded. I was like very, very happy to get in contact with you. So it is possible for the people that want to reach out to Daren to goalie questions or fan mail or whatever it may be. It's been quite a pleasure, but I always close with the same question every time. If there was one word that summed up your career, Daren, what would it be?
Fun. I enjoyed every minute of it. Fun. You miss
Fantastic.
it, you totally miss it. My advice is never retire until they kick you out because once you give it up, there's nothing like it. There's nothing like that feeling. There's nothing like having butterflies. Um, you know, challenge every night, being part of something that's bigger than you, and especially with the way the NHL is today, it's a great spot for these guys, these youngsters that are coming up. It's a great professional career to have.
So, Darren, I want to reach out that when you do have your book, we'd like to promote it and stay in contact when it's ready to kind of share it on the podcast and keep, like I said, the whole goal is to keep the NHL alumni relevant and keep everybody's name out there with whatever they have going on social media or reaching out to fans that always want to you know connect through social media. So I just from the guys and lifetime hockey fans, we want to say how thankful we are that you came
Well,
on and shared you know good chunk of your career with told stories and maybe some that people knew, some people didn't know, but from lifetime fans, I just want to say thank you from the guys.
Andy, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll get you a copy as soon as it comes out, and I appreciate any help I can get from you.
Oh yeah,
And
we will do what we always do. I'll get involved with you off air, and we'll get the links, and I'll post them with this episode, and still continue to grow from there. Any
yeah,
help that you need, you just let me know.
anybody can get a hold of me on social media. I'll answer them back. So it's not a problem, and I'll be there to make sure that they get an answer from their questions.
Awesome.
I just want to say thank you so much, Darren, for coming on.
Thank you,
Thank
Darren.
you. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Darren.
it, guys.
We
Appreciate your
appreciate
time
it so
very
much.
much, Darren.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you
We'll be
very
in
much.
touch.
All right.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.